We're proud to announce CISO Stories, a new podcast series in partnership with Cybersecurity Collaborative and Cyber Reason. CISO Stories features the candid perspectives and experiences of frontline senior security executives and dives deep into timely security topics. CISO Stories is hosted by Todd Fitzgerald, VP of Cybersecurity Strategy at Cybersecurity Collaborative, and Sam Curry, Chief Product and Security Officer at Cyber Reason. Listen weekly as they speak with extraordinary CISOs by visiting securityweekly.com/CSP. Stopping advanced threats requires knowing exactly what you're up against. ExtraHop Reveal X is the only solution that shows you not just where intruders are going, but where they've been. 90-day look back and complete network visibility across the data center, cloud, and device edge helps security teams respond 84% faster with ExtraHop Reveal X network detection and response. Explore the interactive demo at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian and Jason Albuquerque. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover on one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review suggestions monthly and we'll reach out to you once reviewed and approved. Our next live webcast will be on April 29th at 11 a.m. Eastern, where you will learn how to prepare for modern ransomware attacks. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast to register now. If you missed any of our previously recorded webcasts or technical trainings, they are available for your viewing pleasure at securityweekly.com/on-demand. All right, gentlemen, off to our articles for the day. So this first article, Jason, I thought was interesting, right? It's from Stephen Katz. It's from an interview that Stephen Katz did on MSNBC. And it's an article related to a little bit of that story, talking about, what is a CISO and what are some of the responsibilities? Yeah, and I thought it was interesting because, we talk about the evolution of the CISO role, right? And he lists a lot of things that, as we look at it, like how many of these are going to stay the responsibility? Some of these are newer probably for some people that are in the role.
And honestly, I think there's some items missing that have become responsibilities of CISOs, right? I call out right away business resilience, business continuity and recovery. Those are things that as a CISO, I had a level of responsibility for working with the IT team, right? That was even before I became CIO. Because we needed to create that ability to quickly recover, right? So you had to work with the IT teams on that recovery model, the processes, the playbooks, all of that. So that there's some things in here. There's added responsibility. Governance is another one, right? I mean, security plays a role in overall IT governance. So I can, there's a few in here to this list that I'd love to be able to add.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he does talk about governance here, and I've always talked about how I believe the CISO will take a broader governance role, especially in an environment where a lot of stuff is moving outside of a on-prem data center into third-party relationships, whether it's infrastructure or platform or software as a service. There's a governance component because now your infrastructure, you may not own it, but you've got to govern the relationship with who is running it for you, right?
Right. And then ultimately in there, you have to have things like the legal side, right? Regulatory side, having those kind of conversations. Education, training and education is another big one, right? Making sure you're educating the organization, making sure you're educating your staff members, making sure you have the right training for the right people in play. There's a lot there from a training and awareness side.
I was listening to a Joe Rogan episode, and he interviewed the director, Taylor Russell, I believe is the one who said it. He actually just released a documentary called Silk Road, documentary film, which is actually really good. But he tells this crazy story, bear with me for a moment, where he meets Gary Busey. And he tells a story like he goes to his house and Busey's like in his bathrobe, he's holding a shotgun and stuff like that. He's like, but the one thing Busey told me, and Busey's crazy, he's like, is as a director, you need to be like the hub and the spokes of the wheel and not the wheel. Like your job is to just make sure the wheel keeps turning and the more you can just kind of be there and making sure, checking in here and there, like not taking an overly active role, like taking over the actor's role or anyone else's role. I feel like the CISO is the same kind of thing. And listen, you guys describe that. It was kind of the same thing for me, that CISO, there's so many different spokes in that wheel that they really just have to be the hub of all of that.
It's funny that you say that, Paul, because a lot of times with my team, and they'll attest to it and they'll laugh about it, but I look at it this way. I'm not the best violinist in the world. I'm not the best cellist in the world, but what I'm really good at is putting that orchestra of those great musicians together.
Another great analogy. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And really building some beautiful music. So that's
see, if Gary Busey had told you that in his bathrobe, it would have been awesome. You just need to work that in. I mean, just
hold on. Let me go put a bathrobe on. I'll be right back.
Pretend your team like, hey, I met Gary Busey once. He was in a bathrobe, and he told me I should be the conductor of the orchestra.
Actually, we can have Paul put on the bathrobe.
Yeah, I could be the craziest person in the bathrobe. Paul told me this once. In his bathrobe,
that's my own little analogy of how I've put that together in my brain, right? It's right. I'm not here to be the best cellist, right? That's not why I'm in my role. It's to bring everybody together to make a great program.
I guess that makes me play the role of Gary Busey in a bathrobe.
Love it.
You're fine with that.
Yeah, I'm good.
Next Halloween, buddy. That's what I expect your costume to be.
Right?
Yes. So that kind of leads a little bit into the second article, which is around reorienting your cybersecurity program, right? So if you think about this, as the role evolves, your program needs to evolve, right? And I thought this was a really interesting way, because we talk a lot about risk management and aligning, building a risk posture. There's a couple articles in here this week that talk about these aspects of how do you build or develop a risk-based approach to security. And so this next one, obviously start with objectives and risks. We did a webcast with Deep Watch late last year, where we got into some of this like mapping of, how do you look at different business objectives and map them down to business risks, and how does that drive an objective on the security side to implement a control, right? Yeah. Easier said than done, but this article starts to talk about aspects of that alignment.
Yeah, no, and I love it. I mean, this article is totally wrapped around bringing the security team and the security leaders to the business table, right? Having those strategic conversations with the board, being able to boil down the complex terminology and language and technical acumen and all of that, and boil it down to how do we align to the business, right? How do we align to the growth of the business? How do we align to operational efficiencies of the business? How do we align to, the overall personnel type scenario with hiring to the business, right? Because for us, I really truly believe the more we're embedded in the business units, the better we're going to be at identifying those risks at a business unit level, and then be able to boil that up to the leadership of an organization, whether it's the CEO, the CFO, or the board of directors, and have that true business risk conversation. That's when we get elevated. That's when we get elevated in our positions.
Yeah, and I think we've done a good job of doing it. And I'll give you an example with the Accellion breach. I've been talking to some folks about that. It's really interesting to me. If I think about 10, 20 years ago, the business probably would have come to us. Even better, we would have had to get ahead of the project or find out about the project too late, and they're going to put in an FTA, right, to transfer files between your partners and or customers, usually partners, right, and share data. And they'd be like, yep, so we're going to drop this appliance in, and we need you guys to just write some firewall rules for us, right, to make it secure. Right. Now the conversation's very different. As security, we're trying to understand what are the business requirements, how do we implement a system, help the business implement a system that's also going to give us some visibility into it, right? I think we've progressed maybe in midway through, we're like, well, users need training and we need DLP. Now we're like, how do we design a solution that's both secure and serves the needs of the business, and everyone's having that conversation together?
I mean, honestly, Paul, we're winning when we have at the seat of the table, when we're just helping the business decide what product we're going to go with, what application we're going to go with. Because, with the business unit leaders around my organization, the conversations that I had early on was bring us to the table first, because the last thing I want to happen is we begin to invest in a product that we come across and say, we can't use this because. or it brings too much risk to the organization because, right? So I try to give them visibility into the more proactive you are with security, the better off we're going to be at the end of all this. And to be honest with you, we may be part of helping you find the truly best product, because we're going to vet it from a security perspective, but we're also going to be in there looking at feature functionality, because it's part of how we test the applications.
Yeah,
right?
it's not just even a question of build it or buy it, right? There's so many different aspects. When actually in this solution, I was like, there's so many cloud native services. We have developers like, can we just we don't have to build the whole thing our own. We can use cloud native services and let Amazon or one of the other cloud providers provide that functionality.
Yeah. I mean, even vetting a third party that we want to buy a product from. Bring us in up front, right? We can be part of that vetting process. If you bring 3 platforms to the table, the security score around that should count for something, right? I mean, business risk is going to be brought to the organization. So we have to be embedded early on.
Yeah, and this ties into Article 4. I'm going to skip 3 for a second because, again, it's aligning to those enterprise goals. But again, part of this comes down to risk posture, right? And again, the business is going to make the decision on whether they want to accept aspects of that risk. So to your point, Jason, if you're engaged with the business, having these discussions early on, it's going to help you kind of streamline to say, well, all right, these risks you don't want to take on, these risks are okay. Maybe that helps us decide which direction we're going to go to solve this problem. And that is a risk management discussion.
Totally. And honestly, I look at it as more of a highlight to security versus, because this article talks about, traditionally security teams being seen as insurance and cost centers and, little return to the business. Taking that position highlights security as an organization that can bring a positive impact to the business, right? Because now we're positioned in that fashion. We're ahead of the game and we're bringing intelligence to the business units or to the leadership.
Yep, absolutely. The third article, which we skipped over, talks about automation. And I brought this article in because of our last conversation, right? I mean, the ability to look at areas, look at specific use cases where automation helps to take some of the pressure off the business. I mean, I thought John did a really good job of describing kind of his methodology and kind of his process of how he approached the automation side. This article ties into aspects of that as well. There are some use cases that make sense for automation, and there may be some that you can automate pieces, but not the whole thing because I need an analyst.
Yep. No, 100%. And John's approach to implementing SOAR was outstanding. I mean, kudos to him for realizing if you don't have strong processes up front, the technology is not going to do it for you, right? You have to make sure that your runbooks, your playbooks, your processes are solid and up to date. And then that's going to translate into the technology that you can then perform some great automations with. But, for organizations that may not be as mature in building out their playbooks and have documented processes, do that first. Put the investment in first, so that way you can take advantage of the technology and get to that 80% adoption rate like he's looking down the barrel of, right?
Yeah. No, I think he brought up some very good points. Look, without having your base processes document, don't even think about SOAR, right? Because everybody just thinks about it from a technology perspective. I'm just going to buy this thing and put it in. What use cases are you automating?
It's going to solve all my problems, right? It's a solution. It should just solve my problems.
Right. That's the backwards mentality. We can't have that, right? It's, if we do that, you just have a shiny blinky light in a data center.
Yep. Talking about outdated incentives, so this article in cyber insurance, I was kind of intrigued in. There's some plugs for some technology in here, which I wasn't interested in. It's more about what's going to happen in the cyber insurance space. And what this article talks about is some of the outdated incentives, right? Talking about that blinky light, buy cyber insurance because it solves all my problems. Yeah, not so much.
Right. No, I mean, at the end of the day, I struggle with the conversation because, cyber liability assurance is something we have to have. I mean, our customers expect us. Those are questions on vendor risk management assessments, right? Do you have cyber liability insurance? Answer no to that and see what happens, right? I mean, come on. But I also struggle with the value because there have been way too many instances and way too many stories that I've seen when the stuff hits the fan and the customers need the cyber liability insurance and they need it to kick in and they need it to be successful. Then all of a sudden, the insurance companies are going down the ticker. Oh, well, you didn't do this, and you said you attested that you really did that. Guess what? No payment for you. So I've seen too many horror stories like that. And we're still negotiating for ransom. I literally just saw it the other day happening. Right. Well, one of the folks on my team brought it to my attention. They showed me that it was published online by the threat actors. It literally, messages back and forth of them negotiating live with the ransomware teams. Right. It's I don't know. I struggle with it.
So, I mean, think about this for a second, Jason, right? Like, what would you do different, or how are you preparing that? Yes, you need the cyber insurance, but what are you doing in addition to make sure that if you need it, it's there and it's going to get paid? Because to your point, right, they're going to go down the list and go, well, you didn't do this and you didn't do this, therefore we're not going to pay. So how do you reconcile that as an organization?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, it's about building a strong security program. I mean, that's the key, right? If you're doing all the right things in your security program, you won't have to worry about that checklist. I mean, I would still take a look at it and make sure. And I've had instances where I've talked to my insurance company and said, "Is this like from 1980? Like, what are you trying to achieve here?" And we've been able to influence, as subject matter experts, a change in their questionnaire, right? So I think that we as CISOs need to make sure we have strong foundational programs that that we're constantly testing, we're constantly building muscle memory around, risk-based approach. So bring the risk-based approach to the organization, to your leadership, and make sure you're following a risk-based program. Because you don't want to get caught where one check in the box that the insurance company feels you didn't comply with, basically gets it to the point where you're not getting any insurance payment.
I think we're coming down to is,
and I would challenge them, honestly. I would work with your insurance companies and challenge them.
It's not, you shouldn't look at cyber insurance as something that replaces anything you do in your security program. You have to have that. The best use case I've heard for cyber insurance is everyone's going to get hacked at some point. Yep. But if you incur costs, provided you're doing your due diligence and you have a security program, it can help offset some of those costs. I forget who it is who said that. That's when cyber insurance made sense for me. I'm like, because you're going to have to maybe hire a PR company, have Mandy come in, and do forensics, and it doesn't pay for all of that stuff, but if you can offset some of those costs by having an insurance policy, it doesn't supplement anything you do in your security program. You still need to do all of those things.
Absolutely. Right. And think about it this way. I have homeowners insurance, but I still have my carbon monoxide and smoke detectors in my house, right?
And you still get you still get your trees pruned and take down trees that may fall on your house too.
Mm-hmm. Right. But I mean, I think the point is, to an extent, right, is you've got to do the right things so that your cyber insurance policy does offset some of those costs.
Correct.
Where people who are buying cyber insurance thinking that it's the magic solution and not doing anything are going to be in a rude awakening when they need it.
Mm-hmm. That's it. Because I mean, at the end of the day, it's not a great business model if the insurance companies are always paying out, right?
It's not for them.
It's
definitely, that's not what insurers are in the business of, right? They don't want to pay out all those claims all the time, because what you're going to see, and the rates have gone up some. I think they mentioned some rate increases. They were minimal, but I mean, the more we pay out, the higher these premiums are going to get too for organizations that are even doing the right thing. So that's the downside.
And honestly, I think insurance companies could step up to the plate a little bit too, and maybe do a little bit better diligence than sending you 10 questions in a Word document to attest to.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think there are some really good ones that actually do, because we've done some segments on this in the past on Security and Compliance Weekly. There are some good, I think there are, a handful that I think do a much better job of the due diligence process to make sure that they're pricing these programs correctly. And then you have a bunch that don't.
Yep. Yeah. And that's the thing. It should become standard across all of the insurance companies.
Yeah. Last article I had to bring in here because I thought Doug did a fantastic job with this last week. It's how to use recognition to provide a morale boost. And I think it's good for leaders to know what the impact of giving out recognition to employees and what that does, especially in an environment that we're in today where you can't do these in person a lot. So Cyber Risk Alliance did their all hands last week, and I thought, when I read this article, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a perfect example of, Doug, our CEO, coming out with some awards for some individuals, for some teams. He announced the raises and the bonus structures. I mean, those things I thought were great, right? To really boost morale to the organization. And he followed a lot of the steps that are in this article.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a huge thing. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, folks want a salary, a competitive salary, but what do all employees really want to make sure is happening in their job, right? They want to make sure that they're delivering some type of a positive impact, right? I mean, why would you? I mean, at the end of the day, I get it. A job is a job, but folks who have passion and are in it for the career because they love what they do, it's about that positive impact that they can make to the organization and to the team. So those are things you have to recognize. And you know what? There's so many different ways to do it too. It doesn't have to be an entire company meeting, right? That's great that the CEO does that. That's awesome. But at a CISO level, you could do it. I mean, you could do it with just a smaller team meeting, right? An individual department meeting, and give that level of recognition. And hey, by the way, you can nominate up, right? So we have at Carousel, we have something called a Customer Obsessed Success Award. And you can nominate people up for that, for doing, for going beyond their normal job to make sure that our customers are finding value in Carousel and, really going above and beyond to support our customers. So nominate them up.
You can go the other way too. First job I ever worked, we had the concept called the brick. So if an employee and one of your fellow coworkers screwed something up really bad, they had to display the brick on their desk for the entire time until such time there was another company meeting and someone else screwed up, and then the brick
public shaming.
We're going with
transfer.
Positive.
Public
That was positive. I didn't want to get the brick. And it showed like we screwed up. I mean, the worst case is you could display this brick on your desk until someone else screwed up.
How about for all the good peeps, we give them a gold brick?
There you go. But I think you hit on one thing that's really important. Purpose.
That's it.
Employees want to have purpose, right? And they want to be recognized, to continue to be, they want to know that they're making a difference, right? Because if they're not, that's going to be one of the big factors for them to start looking. If they don't feel appreciated and that they have a purpose in the role that they're in, that's when they're going to start looking. And these types of things, whether they're on a large scale like Doug did last week on the Cyber Risk Alliance side, or whether they're smaller things that you've done at Carousel, showing appreciation drives up morale. It helps them be appreciated. Yeah.
And it may sound a little old school, but I learned this from one of my CEOs in a past life. Sometimes just writing a small little note and sending it off saying thank you for what you did and kind of, just kind of outlining why you appreciate them and leave it on their desk or send it to them in the mail.
Yeah, we used to decorate
snail mail.
We used to decorate the brick with like a little reminder of how the person screwed up. Like if they used the wrong floppy, we would like tape a floppy disk to it. That's not the same thing, is it?
No. Going the wrong way, Paul.
This is the 90s, all right? Things changed.
No. So Jason, thank you for joining.
I remember. It was brutal back then, Paul. Brutal.
So, Jason, I want to thank you for your great positive influence on the show today. Paul, maybe
I gave the bad example, all right? That's a bad example. I want people to know what a bad example looks like, okay? We talk too much about the good examples. We should recognize things like that.
Hey, listen, that's you and your Darth Vader leadership style.
That's right. It is. That is very Darth Vader leadership.
That's true. Yes. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. We're off next week, so we'll see you in 2 weeks on Business Security Weekly.